Hello friends, welcome to another theoretical discussion on the laboratory techniques that are associated with mineral processing or in general process metallurgy. Now, in our theoretical courses, we have been looking into several mineral processing techniques. We have categorized them and we have looked into them. Now, for us to be completely sure about the different techniques that we are adopting are fruitful, we need to carry out some sort of a validation, some sort of a test of the resulting yield, so that we are sure about the technique that we are adopting gives us some profit or gives us the desired product. So in this discussion we will be looking into one such laboratory testing that helps us understand whatever mineral processing technique that we are adopting it is fruitful, is giving the desired end product. So one such laboratory testing technique that helps us understand or that helps us be sure about the working of the processing technique that we have adopted is referred to as the sieve analysis. Now the processing technique, if you could recollect, involves several techniques. It involves both concentration and distillation together, and the product of each of these techniques are quite different. And we need to know, or we need to be sure that whatever monetary or time investment we are making in each of these techniques, the end product is what we desire. It has been fruitful. Whatever investment we have been making, be it monetary, be it human resources, be it time, whatever investment we are making has been fruitful. So in order to do that, we carry out certain tests after each of these techniques, and one such test is what we will be considering in this discussion, and that test is referred to as the sieve analysis. So as usual, in this discussion we will be considering what a sieve analysis is and why we need to do it, and finally how it is done in a laboratory setting. Now the sieve analysis is nothing but a process of, also it's a test of analyzing the size of the particles. So sieve analysis can be translated as a size analysis. So sieve analysis is nothing but size analysis. What it essentially does is it analyzes size of the different particles that are present in a mixture. Now when you hear the keywords like different particles and mixture, then you can understand that, or you can relate that the product that we are analyzing in case of sieve analysis, it comes from comminution. So the product or the input that we'll be analyzing using sieve analysis, it comes from liberation, and if you want to be specific about the technique, it comes from comminution. So the output that comes out of the comminution, that yield that comes out of the comminution, is what we will be feeding into the sieve analysis to see how fruitful has the comminution been. So in order to liberate the desired mineral that is locked in or surrounded by the impurities or gangue, we are fragmenting this run-of-mine particle, this large run-of-mine particles. So this large particles that we mine out, we break it down into smaller fragments, and this is what we refer to as comminution, and this essentially liberates your locked in desired mineral or concentrate. Now in order to achieve that, fragment these large sized particles, and when we do that, what we essentially need is we need to reduce the size of this large particle. Supposing if we introduce this comminution to, or rather we impose this comminution on a large size particle and the desired size is not reached, then whatever investments we have made has not achieved this complete goal. So in order to be sure that whatever comminution, whatever end size we have in mind has been achieved through this process, we need to have a specific testing approach, and this testing approach is given by the sieve analysis. Now if I have, say, a larger particle and I want to reduce it to, say, the size of 300 microns, and I adapt a specific technique for it without measuring the size of the end product, I will not be able to say that the desired size has been reached without measuring the size of the fragments that come out of this process of comminution, I will not be able to say the desired size has been reached, and this validation is done by the sieve analysis. So the input for the sieve analysis comes from the comminution or the liberation process. Now, if you could recollect, in the discussion of liberation, we saw that it is just not that we involve one cycle of liberation, one cycle of comminution, but one category of particles called the middling are fed again into the liberation cycle. So there is a category of particle that is fed again into the liberation or comminution. So there is one category of particles of a specific size that are further fragmented. So you have the initial fragments, and one specific group is selected and they are further fragmented and they are joined with this initial group. So essentially what you would have is, you would have mixture of fragments, and these mixture of fragments are not of identical size. So the feed that you are giving in, or the test that is being performed for the sieve analysis, is fragments that come out of liberation, and a critical feature of these fragments is that they are not of identical size. So this means that each category of fragments, they have their own characteristic size. And now when we introduce the subsequent comminutions and subsequent or secondary degree fragmentation, and we arrive at the specific a specific value or a specific size of a particular category of particles, then we need to again be sure that this second degree comminution has arrived at its specific size. So therefore, even that is being analyzed using, or even that is being verified using sieve analysis. So initial liberation, the desired size which has been achieved is analyzed by sieve analysis, and the subsequent liberation and the feed that you given for the subsequent liberation is being fragmented is also verified using sieve analysis. So in the entire process of the or in the entire chain of the mineral processing, the sieve analysis is used in order to verify if the desired end of the comminution is reached, or the comminution is being efficiently used, or the quality of the comminution is being achieved. So that is one of the critical purpose of the sieve analysis. So in liberation, the end product involves, because of its characteristic chain, it involves a wide range of particles, a range of particles with a wide range of sizes, and these different sizes, they ultimately go back to the overall process chain that is involved. By analyzing the sizes of these different particles, then we will at one hand able to say that okay, the liberation has done its job. So we have one category of particles that are larger than the other category of particles, and this second category of particles are being subjected to a second degree of liberation. So the liberation has done its job, or rather the comminution, the fragmentation has done its job. So that is one thing that we can understand from the sieve analysis. The second aspect that we can understand from the sieve analysis is the overall process chain works. The overall process chain that we have defined, or that we have devised, it works. So that is something that can also be analyzed from that can also be understood from the sieve analysis. So what I mean by the overall process chain is validated, or it can be an overall process chain, the accuracy of the overall process chain can be verified by sieve analysis. So what I mean by that is, when we devise a process chain, we are subjecting a specific category of the particles to the subsequent comminution or subsequent fragmentation. Now, to decide this particular specific category of particle is the one that needs to be fed into it, and it is the one that has been fragmented. It is not the rest, but this specific category of particles have alone been fragmented. Then we need to verify that it is this specific category of particles that has been reduced in size. So even that in idea, or that conception, it comes from the sieve analysis. So on one hand, the sieve analysis helps us understand the quality of fragmentation. You are imposing, or you are introducing a large size particle into, or you are breaking down a large size particle into smaller sizes. The amount of this reduction in size can be verified using sieve analysis. Secondly, what kind of particle is subjected to the secondary comminution? is also can be verified using sieve analysis. So when you consider the what kind of particle is being fed into the comminution, or how the resulting size of it would be, then essentially you are considering the overall process chain, and the sieve analysis also plays a role in devising the overall process chain. Because again, ultimately, when you consider just 1 degree comminution, one first fragmentation, then the size of the particles will be uniform. Only when you consider the second degree comminution, you will be able to arrive at a mixture wherein the sizes are not uniform, and based on these non-uniform sizes, you will be able to understand that the overall process chain has performed accurately, and now subsequently you will be able to process this mixture of non-identically sized fragments. Now, when you consider these feed that you provide for sieve analysis, very rarely they are of circular size. So when we consider the sieve analysis, essentially we saw that it is nothing but the size analysis. Now when you say the size of a given fragment, the fragments are rarely circular. So often the fragments are of irregular shape. So if your fragments are of regular size, then we can use the term like diameter or the length of the sides. So length and diameter are certain terminologies that we can use to describe the size of the fragments, or the size of the particles. So these terminologies, diameter, length, or even height and other factors, they play a critical role only when your particle are of regular shape. So only when your particles are of regular shape, these terminologies make any sense. So essentially, often or very rarely your particles are of this regular shape, and often they are of irregular shape that cannot be easily described using some mathematical expression. So in that case, whenever your particle, or in the practical instances wherein often your particle are of irregular shape, a common terminology that is used to describe the size of the particle is equivalent diameter. So on the theoretical side of understanding the sieve analysis, whenever you consider the size of the irregular shaped particle, you refer to that using the terminology of equivalent diameter. So what this equivalent diameter means is that this equivalent diameter, purely from a theoretical perspective, equivalent diameter means how a particle behaves. So when we are considering or we are measuring or estimating the equivalent diameter, what you observe is how a particle moves, how the mobility of a particle is, and then you relate it to the mobility of a similar circular particle. So if you have, say, a particle of this size, of this irregularly shaped particle, and you study its mobility, and you relate it to the mobility of different spheres of varying radii, and you will observe that the mobility of this particle here is similar to the mobility of this particular circular or spherical particle of the specific radii, and this would correspond to its equivalent diameter. So essentially, from a theoretical standpoint, whenever you have irregularly shaped particles, which is often, in that case you would have to use a specific terminology called equivalent diameter in order to understand the size of that particle. So in order to arrive at this equivalent diameter, what you would essentially do is, you would essentially consider the mobility of this particular particle and relate it to the mobility of several spherical particles, and you will identify that size of one spherical particle, or the mobility of one spherical particle with specific size, is similar to that of this mobility of the irregular particle, and that you equate and relate it to and identify this diameter of this particle and refer to that as the equivalent diameter of this particle. So equivalent diameter of this particle is essentially identified by considering the mobility. Now, in case of sieve analysis, we would see in few minutes that this equivalent size is determined in a different manner. So, but for this sieve analysis, we would be stuck with studying the mobility of the different circular particles and related to the mobility of the irregular particle and identifying the equivalent diameter. But the sieve analysis gives us a unique, or rather a straightforward way of identifying the equivalent size of an irregularly shaped particles. So why does one need to do, or what is the reason for the sieve analysis to be performed is that first, it helps us understand the quality of combination, quality of fragmentation. Secondly, it helps us validate the overall reparation technique, the overall reparation process chain. It helps us understand that whatever technique that we have devised, say in this technique that we have devised, I am feeding in 40% of my middling to the combination, then in my end product there should be 40% of particles that are relatively smaller than the rest. So in that way, sieve analysis also helps us validate the overall liberation process chain. And finally, despite the particles being irregular, it helps us identify the equivalent size of these particles. Now, let us understand what are the different terminologies that are associated with sieve analysis are. So first of all, as the name indicates, the sieve analysis involves a component called sieve that you can see here. The sieve you could have also seen around your kitchen. So this is nothing but a straightforward sieve, and it includes what is referred to as meshes. So this is a sieve, and it is characteristically, it comprises of what we refer to as meshes. Now these meshes, they can be in the form of square as shown here, or they can be also circular. So the morphology of these meshes, they can be square or they can be circular. Now in addition to the morphology of the meshes, another characteristic feature that distinguishes one mesh from another, one sieve from another, is the size of these openings, the size of these perforations. So these are referred to as, the size of these openings, these are referred to as apertures. So in sieve analysis, we have sieves, and in that sieves, they comprise of, each sieve it comprises of a characteristic mesh, and this mesh can be circular or square, and even between two square meshes, a distinguishing feature can be the size of these openings, and these size of these openings are referred to as aperture. Now the way we measure the aperture is, in case of square mesh, it is nothing but the length of each sides. So this would be the aperture of a square mesh. In case of a circular mesh, the diameter would be the size of the aperture. So depending on the meshes that we consider, the way we measure the size of the aperture vary. So in case of square mesh, it is just the size of the square. In case of the circular mesh, it is the diameter of each of these opening. Now initially, whenever we want to designate a specific mesh or a specific sieve, so we have a sieve that comprises of mesh, and that mesh can be square or circular, and even within the square mesh or the circular mesh, we have meshes of different sizes. Now we need to designate each of these meshes so that whenever we are planning a sieve analysis, we are able to choose the mesh appropriately. So initially, the initial attempts or the very preliminary attempts to designate these meshes have been to consider what is referred to as the mesh number. So just nothing but number. So we have different forms of meshes. We have square meshes, circular meshes, and we have meshes of different sizes or different sizes of apertures. Now we need to designate each of these meshes separately so that we will be able to identify them and use them for our purposes. Now in that case, so the initial way of classifying or designating these meshes involved mesh number. The way we define a mesh number of a sieve is that we consider a region of 1 square inch, and then we calculate or we count essentially the number of meshes that are present in that 1 square inch area, imaginary area that we have considered, and we relate it to that mesh number. So mesh number is nothing but number of apertures that are present in a given mesh for a unit square inch area. So within a unit square inch area, how many meshes are present for a given sieve is what is referred to as the mesh number. Now, even though this appears to be an ideal way of classifying or designating a given mesh, the problem cropped up when different materials different materials were being used to construct these meshes, and the thickness of each of these or the thickness of these different materials to create these meshes varied. So this mesh number is dependent on it is dependent on the thickness of the material that is used to form the mesh. So when you have a thin material to form the mesh, rather if you want to illustrate it, when you have a thin material something like this, then the number of meshes that can be accommodated within a square inch area will be much higher when you have a thick mesh something like this, or the material that is used for making this mesh is thick as something like this. So therefore we need to have a different approach for designating these different sieves. So the mesh number is rather restricted because it depends on the thickness of the material that is used to form the meshes, and we can have thin material and we can have thick material. When we have thin material, then the mesh number would be higher even though the size of the aperture is the same. When you use thick material, then the mesh number would be lower, but when you use the thin mesh, the number of mesh or the mesh number will be higher even though the apertures remain the same. Since the critical factor that dictates the characteristic features of a given sieve is aperture, recently or nowadays the sieves are still being, or the sieves are referred to as, or they are designated based on the aperture size. So essentially a principal component of a sieve analysis is sieve, and this sieve, it comprises of meshes, and these meshes are of different forms and are also of different sizes. Now in order to designate each of these meshes, one way of adapting is mesh number, and since mesh number has some restriction, then we go for identifying these sieves based on their aperture sizes, because the aperture size is the critical feature. Now in an industrial setting wherein a sieves of a given form is used, sieves of a given materials are used, which means that the thickness of each of these material is fixed. So in such a setting, still mesh number is being used. So that's the reason I helped you understand what a mesh number is, because the use of aperture size is largely confined to a laboratory setting, because here we have a different, we use a different sieves for different analysis. However, when you go for an industrial setting wherein you already have a huge number of sieves and you already know what is the specific material or what is the specific mineral that you will be assessing using the sieve analysis, and you already know that the thickness of these sieves are fixed, then in that case, in an industrial setting, still mesh number is being used despite its restriction. So you have two ways of designating the sieves. One is through mesh number, which is rather a restricted way, or old way, and it is used largely in industrial setting wherein everything is set and you know what material you will be processing and the thickness is rather constant. However, the ideal way of doing it is using the aperture size. Now, since the mesh is dependent on, in one way or the other, on the thickness of these individual material, thickness of these sieves, or rather these meshes, there is a limit to which we can have the aperture size. We cannot have an aperture size that is very smaller than the thickness of these material. So therefore, the sieve analysis is possible generally only above 50 microns. The sieve analysis is possible only when the size of the particle is 50 microns. So this is something that we need to understand. Since the sieve itself is dependent on the thickness of these materials, and and your apertures cannot be very small or smaller than the thickness of this material, so therefore there is a limit for the fragments that can be considered for sieve analysis, and that is often, so you can only consider this often greater than 50 microns. So you cannot consider any particles effectively when their sizes is less than 50 microns. Now let us see how this sieve analysis is performed. The sieve analysis, there is a way of there is an approach that is adopted for this sieve analysis. So essentially the feed for sieve analysis is a pre-weighed, a sample of the mixture of fragments. So essentially we need to understand, so the first criteria or the first critical component or the critical feature that we need to understand about the input that we want to study, the sample that we want to study, is the weight of the sample. So whatever sample that we are about to study using sieve analysis, it needs to be weighed first. So we consider a pre-weighed sample of this mixture of fragments, and then this pre-weighed sample of mixture of fragments is fed into a series of sieves which have a decreasing aperture sizes. So the first critical aspect of the sieve analysis is you consider a sample. The sample comprises of fragments of varying sizes, and critically you have already weighed accurately the weight of this overall mixture that comprises of fragments of different sizes. Now once you have weighed it, you subject this pre-weighed sample of fragments to a series of sieves that are of varying aperture sizes. You begin with a sieve that is of maximum aperture size, and then you keep on decreasing the size of the aperture gradually. So you begin with the sieve of maximum aperture size, and then you reduce the size of the apertures in the subsequent sieves. So essentially what you are doing is you are successively considering finer sieves. And in addition to exposing these fragments to the different sieves of varying sizes, particularly in a specific order, that is decrease in the aperture sizes or more finer sizes, you agitate your individual sieve, you vibrate your individual sieve. So there are reasons for vibrating. So essentially you would feed in your weighed sample to a particular sieve, and in that sieve you will agitate your sample. So there are reasons for why this agitation needs to be done, why we need to rather vibrate the individual sieve when we have fed in our sample. So one reason is that each particle, it needs to have access to the aperture. So since what we are considering is a mixture of smaller particles, we agitate in order to ensure that each particles that are found in this mixture reach the aperture. It is not that some of the particles block the other particles from reaching the aperture. So therefore we vibrate so that every particle that is present in the fragment reach the aperture. Secondly, since we have irregular particles or mostly irregular particles in our mixture, in specific orientation, these irregular particles may find its way through the aperture. So if I assume a particle such as this, and the aperture size is this, then in this orientation my particle may not pass through this aperture here. So in this orientation, in this alignment, my particle will not pass through this particular aperture. But if I change this orientation to this, then it is possible for my particle to pass through this aperture. So in order to achieve this favorable orientation, the agitation is introduced for the sieves. So there are two key purposes. One is to ensure that all the particles reach the aperture. Secondly, the favorable orientation that allows for a particle to pass through the aperture is being achieved. Thirdly, any blockage. So when you have a particle of specific size that blocks your aperture, so that even that blockade can be removed when you introduce this agitation. So if there is a particle that blocks your aperture, thereby making it inaccessible for other further particles, the vibration helps to release that blockade. So for this reason, we have agitation that is introduced in the scheme of things of the sieve analysis. So sieve analysis, the overview is that we introduced a pre-weighed sample to the setup to the initial sieve of the maximum aperture size, and then you have follow-up sieves that have the reduced aperture size when compared to the initial one, and then you agitate each of these sieves so that every particle acts as an access to the aperture, and a favorable orientation is achieved by every particle so that it can pass through the aperture, and finally any blockade is reached. So this is how in general the sieve analysis operates. So these are the critical features that are associated with the sieve analysis. Now we saw that there is a specific criterion that is associated with the sieve analysis, and that criterion is each and every particle must have access to the aperture. So this is what we refer to as this is what is the specific criterion that governs the sieve analysis. So whatever we do, whatever measures we take in the context of sieve analysis must ensure that every particle has access to the aperture. So whatever embellishments we make, whatever specific consideration we make for the sieve analysis must be associated with this criteria here. That criteria is every particle must have access to the aperture. So based on this you decide your sample size. So your sample must not be so huge that not every particle have access to this access to the aperture. So you decide your sample size accordingly, and even the size of the sieve, the overall size of the sieve is also based on this particular criteria. Secondly, we attempt to remove all the fines initially. We attempt to remove, because this criteria needs to be fulfilled, we attempt to remove all fines from the mixture. So before feeding in or before considering a particular set of fragments for sieve analysis, we attempt to remove all fines and all particles that may cause blockade of these apertures in the initial condition, in the initial state. So before feeding in your sample for the sieve analysis, we attempt to remove all the fines that are associated with the fragments. The fines meaning that could form, that could block the apertures, that could hinder our processes, that are often of the size that are less than 50 microns, that are less than the size that an aperture could handle. So attempts will be made to remove all these fines, and also particles that can bind together and block the apertures. So these are often referred to as near size particles. So these near size particles, they bind together and then they block the openings, they block the apertures. So we have seen there is a general approach that is taken for the sieve analysis. It involves using a sample that has already been weighed, and then we expose the sample to a sequence of sieves wherein the size of the aperture is gradually decreasing, and then we agitate each of these sieves. Now the reason we agitate these sieves is because we want to expose each of these particles to the aperture, and secondly we need to ensure that even the irregular particles are allowed to pass through these apertures, and to remove any blockades. Now while planning for your sieve analysis, you must operate on a specific criteria, and that criteria is every particle should reach the aperture. So this criteria dictates how much of a sample we are considering and what is the size of the entire sieve. And secondly, because of this criteria, we need to do some pre-processing that will remove certain materials or certain fragments that block the aperture. Now, having seen what is required and what is the overview of the sieve analysis, let us see how experimentally this is being done. So experimentally, this is how a sieve analysis setup looks like. We have our individual sieves here, and this sieve with the largest aperture is what we refer to, or the sieve is referred to as the lid, or rather the sieve it comprises of a lid as well, so that the slit, or rather the sieve, is accompanied with a lid, and this sieve has the maximum aperture size, and this overall stack of sieves are referred to as stacks or nests. So again, to be more legible, these are referred to as stacks or nest. So we have our individual sieve that is at the top. It accompanies with a lid so that when you are agitating, the particles won't move away from the sieve, or they will not escape the sieve. So we have the top sieve that has the maximum aperture size, and we have the stacks of sieves or the nest of sieves, and your aperture size, it decreases as you go down. This aperture size of these individual sieves, it decreases as you go down, and finally you have this final sieve it does not have any, or this final container, it does not have any sieves at the end, and this is referred to as receiver. So this is what your overall sieve analysis setup looks like. So it comprises of stacks of sieves which are referred to as nest, and as you go down the stack, the overall aperture size, it keeps on gradually decreasing, and the end of it you have your receiver, and at the top of it you have your lid. So lid, it prevents from the particles from escaping, and the receiver, it finally collects all the fragments that have passed through each of these individual sieves or specific aperture sizes. So this is how the overall sieve analysis works, and this is how the experimental setup for the sieve analysis looks like. So if you relate our understanding of the overview of sieve analysis to this experimental setup, you can understand that we are feeding in the pre-measured or pre-weighed sample into this sieve, or into the sieve that is accompanied by the lid, and then you are agitating the whole setup, and the particles that are greater than that of the size of this aperture of this preliminary or the initial sieve will pass to the next one, and the particles that are of the lower size will, even lower size than the secondary sieve, will go to the third one. So the particles that are greater than that of the size of the aperture will stay, and the particles that size of which are lower than that of the aperture size will move on to the next sieve. So that is how the whole, it is rather straightforward, and that is how the whole process of sieve analysis operates in this nest of sieves. And finally, the particles that are so small that they have gone through all these apertures get collected in the receiver. And essentially what you will be doing is, you already know the overall weight, and you will be measuring the weight of these individual particles that are collected in each of these sieves, and then you take the ratio. So for instance, if I calculate after the overall process is done, I calculate the weight of the fragments that are collected in C1. So S1 be the weight of the particles that are collected in C1, and then I take the ratio of it with respect to the overall weight, and then multiply it by 100. So that is the fraction of the particles that are larger than the aperture size that is associated with C1. So this I can go on doing for different sieves, and measuring it for different sieves. I can measure the weight of the fragments that are locked in by the different sieves, and then calculate the percentage of the weight that is associated with each of these sieves. And this is how I measure, or this is how I represent what is being estimated in the sieve analysis. So the way to represent the results that we get from sieve analysis is often done in this way, where you have so there are two ways of doing that. One way is you consider the size range of the sieve. So initially you have a sieve of size this 250 micrometers, and all the particles that are above this particular size, we weigh them, and you calculate the percentage of it. And the particles that pass through this particular sieve, and which are but that are held by the sieve of this particular size, we measure the weight of it and calculate it percentage. So the aperture size of the second sieve is 180 microns, but the particles that are calculated or that are collected by the sieve, the size range will be between less than 250 microns to 180 microns. And in the third sieve, even though its aperture is of 125 micron size, the particle size that are collected by this particular sieve will be of the range 180 to 125 micron, because any particle that is smaller than 180 micron will pass through the second sieve. So therefore what we essentially have is, we have a range. So The particles that are smaller than the previous sieve will pass through it, but are held by a specific sieve when its size is greater than the corresponding aperture. So therefore, any particle that is less than 250 will go through the first sieve, but when it's greater than 180, which is the aperture size of the second sieve, it is being restricted. But if it is less than 180, it goes through to the third sieve. But if its size is less than 125 microns, then it is being held by the third sieve, and so on and so forth. We are able to then directly measure the weight associated with each of these fragments and then calculate its percentage. Now another way of doing it is you directly consider you don't consider the ranges, the possible ranges in sizes. Here you are just considering the possible ranges in sizes, meaning so the fragments that you have in the second sieve could be of the size range from 250 to 180, and in the third sieve it could be from 180 to 125, and in the penultimate sieve it could be 63 to 45. So this gives you a size range of possible sizes of the fragments that could be present in a given sieve. Another way of doing it is, instead of considering the size range of possible fragments in a mixture, we could consider directly the size of the aperture alone, and then we can say how much has been stopped by, or what is the percentage of the particles that are held by each of these sieves. So essentially, the aperture of 250 micron, it holds 0.1% of your overall particle. The aperture of 180 micron, it holds 3% of your overall fragments, and so on and so forth. And finally, the aperture of 45 micron, it holds about 89% of your overall particle. So now, instead of considering the ranges of the particle sizes, you can directly focus on the aperture size alone, and then what percentage of your material holds this aperture size, or it can be held by this aperture size can be estimated. So what percentage of your fragments can be held by this aperture size can be tabulated in this way. So essentially, whatever output you get from the sieve analysis can be tabulated in this manner. So of course, every tabulation is made by calculating the weight of the fragments that are associated with each sieve. So the weight percent, the percentage of the particle that has passed through, or that is passed through a given sieve and that is held by a given sieve. So this percentage is also calculated by estimating the weight that is associated with each sieve. So essentially, once your sieve analysis is done, you remove each of these sieves and calculate the weight of the fragments that are present in each of these sieves, and after calculating it, you estimate the weight percent, and you estimate either you estimate the weight percent or you estimate the overall percentage, or what is the percentage of the material that is contained in that sieve, or the percentage of the material that has passed through that sieve. So either you can estimate the percentage of material that is present in that sieve, or the percentage of material that has passed through that sieve. So this is a tabulated way of representing the results that we get. And finally, when we want to represent it in an illustrative manner, in a graphical manner, then we need to choose the specific way of representing it. One is again the weight percentage way, wherein you just estimate the weight of the fragments that are present in each sieve, and based on the overall weight you calculate the weight percentage. Or the other way of doing it is, you, instead of considering the amount of particles that are present in each sieve, you can calculate the amount of particle that has gone through that sieve. So when you perform the sieve analysis, there are some weight of particles that are held by a specific sieve. Instead of representing that, you can represent the amount of particles that have passed through that sieve. So that is what is referred to as by cumulative undersize percentage. So instead of considering the amount of particle that is held by a specific sieve, you can consider the amount of particle that passes through that sieve. So it is nothing but 100 minus this value here. If you could just subtract it, you would find that 100 minus this value here would give you this value here. So it is related in that manner. 100 minus this value here would give you this value here. So ultimately what you have is, instead of considering rather the individual fragments that are held by an individual sieve, we are considering the amount of fragments that are allowed to pass through the sieve. So when we do that, the graphical representation would look something like this, where the particle size that are of less than or that are allowed by the 250 micron mesh is more than 99%, and then it gradually reduces as you keep on reducing the aperture size or the mesh size. So whatever particles are there that are less than 250%, that are about 99% here, and the particles that are less than, say here we have close to 90 microns, so what the particles that are less than 90 microns are close to 70% here, and the particles that are less than 70 microns are close to 40%, and the particles that are less than, say, 50 microns are close to 20%. So instead of representing the weight percentage of each of these sieve apertures, so weight percentage of the fragments that are held by each of these sieves, we can say that this particular sieve allows, say, 90% of the particles to pass through. So it means 90% of the particles have a size that is less than the aperture size of the corresponding sieve. So based on that, we can have our rather illustrative representation of the results. So instead of considering the amount of particles, so when you have a sieve like this, and instead of considering the amount of particles that are present in the sieve alone, you consider the amount of particles that the sieve has let through, and then based on that you will be able to say this fraction of particles are less than the aperture size of the sieve. So therefore, when you have the maximum aperture size of 250 microns, so you have more than 90% of particles that have size more than 250 microns. So this is how we graphically represent the results of the sieve analysis. So it is the tabulated way of representing it. So more accurately, you can estimate the oversize percentage, and then 100 minus this would give you the amount of particles that will pass through a given sieve, and that you can represent it graphically. So this is how we perform. So what we are essentially saying is why we need to perform sieve analysis, how the sieve analysis is performed, what are the different components that are involved in it, and finally how it is graphically represented. So with this, I would like to wind this lecture, rather a pretty long lecture up, and we will see ourselves in the next discussion, wherein we will consider another laboratory technique. Goodbye.